Every night, sleep paralysis haunted me, becoming my personal curse. It felt like I would wake up but couldn't move, as if invisible forces held me down. During these moments, I always sensed that someone or something was watching me, lurking in the shadows of my room. But one night turned those unsettling feelings into a true nightmare. It was an ordinary evening, and I went to bed hoping for a peaceful sleep. Soon I felt the familiar heaviness, and the world around me fell silent, plunging me into a state between sleep and wakefulness. My eyes opened, and I saw my room, dimly lit by the faint light of the moon filtering through the curtains. The room was silent, disturbed only by the sound of rain against the window. But something was wrong. I sensed a presence. And then I saw it. In the corner of the room stood a figure. It was tall and gaunt, with long, tangled hair that covered most of its face. But what struck me the most were its eyes, huge, red-black, glowing in the dark. They stared at me, piercing my soul. The creature began to move towards me, its long arms reaching out, fingers gnarled and bony. I tried to scream but couldn't make a sound. My heart pounded so hard it felt like it would burst from my chest. It drew closer to my bed and leaned over me. I felt its cold breath on my face, sending shivers down my spine. The creature whispered something in an unfamiliar language, and each word seemed to seep into my consciousness, filling me with a chilling dread. Its voice was low and malevolent, like a murmur from the depths of darkness. Suddenly, its hands clasped around my throat, squeezing with inhuman strength. I tried to resist, but my body remained immobile. Panic engulfed me as I struggled for every breath. The creature stared directly into my eyes, its gaze flooding me with terror. "You belong to me," it whispered, its voice echoing in my mind. I felt its grip tighten on my throat, and the world around me began to fade. Abruptly, the creature released my throat and grabbed my legs, yanking me off the bed. I felt my body slide onto the floor. It continued to whisper, and I realized its words were meant to break my will, to drive me mad. A strange smell filled the room, a mix of decay and rot, intensifying my horror. I desperately tried to break free from this nightmare, to scream, to move, to do anything, but it was useless. The creature dragged me toward the darkest corner of the room. It seemed as though something even more sinister waited in that darkness, and I was on the verge of seeing it. "You won't escape," the creature whispered, its voice filled with malice and hatred. I felt its hands wrapping around my legs, and fear completely overtook me. And suddenly, as if by a snap, the paralysis lifted. I jolted awake, gasping as if from a blow. The room was empty, and the creature had vanished as if it had never been there. But the sensation of its hands on my throat, its whisper, its eyes, all of it remained in my memory, like a burn. That night changed me forever. I knew it wasn't just a vision, but something real, lurking in the shadows. Since then, every time I fall asleep, I fear it will return. And each time I wake up in sleep paralysis, I sense that the creature is somewhere nearby, waiting for its moment to come after me again. I began researching this phenomenon, trying to understand what was happening to me. I read articles, books, watched documentaries, but the answers provided no relief. Everywhere it was said that sleep paralysis was just a trick of the mind, that during these moments, one sees hallucinations. But I knew it was more than just visions. One night, when I was again in a state of paralysis, I heard the familiar whisper. My heart raced, and I realized the creature had returned. This time, its voice was more insistent, and I felt it growing stronger. I tried to fight, but my body was paralyzed once again. The creature reappeared before me, its red-black eyes glowing in the dark. It approached closer and whispered my name. "You won't escape," it repeated, and I felt its cold hands wrap around my throat. My chest tightened, and I couldn't breathe. I realized I had to fight. With my last ounce of strength, I tried to scream, and at that moment, the light in the room flickered, and the creature disappeared. I was gasping for air, trying to regain my composure. The room's light was on, and I realized someone had entered. It was my sister. She said she heard me scream and came to check if I was all right. I told her about my night terrors, about the creature that haunted me. She listened attentively and suggested I see a specialist. The next day, I went to a doctor who referred me to a psychotherapist. I started undergoing therapy, and gradually my night terrors began to lessen. But I knew the creature was still somewhere nearby, lurking in the shadows of my mind. Months passed, and I began to feel better. But one night, I woke up in a state of paralysis again. The room was dark, and I felt the familiar cold. The creature had returned. It stood by my bed, its eyes glowing in the dark. "You won't escape," it whispered, and I felt its hands wrap around my throat. This time I was ready to fight. I remembered everything I had learned in therapy and began to mentally scream, to resist. The light in the room started to flicker, but I kept fighting. Suddenly, the light burst brightly, and the creature vanished. I woke up in a cold sweat but felt that something had changed. It wouldn't return. I had won. Since then, I haven't experienced sleep paralysis again. But every night when I go to sleep, I remember the horrors I had to endure. And I know that somewhere in the dark, the creature still lurks, waiting for its moment.